To me, I've not used Zoom before. So welcome. I'm Simon Foster. I'm here in my role as chairman of the AEO International Group. We've done several of these webinars as the international group last year, but this is the first one where we're doing as part of the webinar series. As you can see, this one's called Look East. It's part of a series of two, with Look West taking place next week. And the subtly named things are one where we're looking eastwards towards Asia, and the other one looking west from Europe and into North America. We're doing it because when we've done these before, we've done them as going around the world, and we felt that the subject matter was such at this point that we wanted to really take the time to dwell on both. So hopefully that will work for everybody. One thing I would say about this one is unlike previous ones, we don't have the Chatham House rule, as Michael pointed out to me. It's not Chatham House rules. So, and this is being recorded, so if people want to log on later, they can do. If anyone is interested in the international group is about promoting the interests of AEO members who operate outside of the UK, which is a ever increasing number of you. Then please do reach out to Joe and the team at the AEO, and they'll be happy to tell you more about the work we do and how we move forward. So from an admin perspective, can I just do the usual questions? So you'll see at the bottom that there is a Q&A function. Please do post questions in there. I see a lot of you have found the chat function, so you can also chat to us in there, but we'll primarily be taking questions from the Q&A box, so please try and do that. We won't be asking people to come and speak their questions. What we will do is, though, try and weave any questions you ask into the discussions we're having with the panel. We've already had lots of questions from you already, so thank you for those. And we've tried to group those in themes and bring them together. Again, apologies if we don't answer every single question specifically, but hopefully we can try and cover most of the ground and the things that you've said. And so we'll try and do that. So if you can, stay on mute while we're here, unless you're desperate to heckle us or make a point that you think we're doing terrible, in which case then we'll go through there. What we're trying to do as we go through the subject matter is to stick to three areas, and I'll come to those in a second, but three general themes. But before I do that, let me introduce our panel. So the first person on our panel is Michael Duck. I'm sure anybody who's been in the industry will know Michael. I've known Michael for far too many years, and I'd like to admit. He's shown me very much kindness and been an absolute gentleman to me, introducing me to places all over the world. He's been with UBM for, I did look it up, but it was far too many years to mention Michael, and is now with Informa and has a brand new role in Informa where he gets to travel even more than he did before once he's allowed to. So very nice to see you, Michael. Michael is based in Hong Kong and is frankly an expert on whole of the industry, but probably very specifically on China and Asia and India, and in fact everywhere in Asia, Michael, I think it's fair to say. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Simon.
Monica Mullally, I've not known for quite as long, but I've known her for quite some time. Monica heads up the Hong Kong Convention Centre and has done since 2012. She's been, I find this surprising, Monica, it says on your bio that you've been in the industry for over 30 years, which I find amazing to say, but shows that, but always in the hospitality industry across Asia. So a real expert both on Hong Kong and on the wider picture. And I'm delighted to say is the incoming UFI president. I think you start next year, don't you? Is it this year or next year?
Next year. Oh no, this year. This year, November.
I did want to check, but I think it's
November.
Year. So Monica will be only the second female UFI president in history, which I think is absolutely
the first
amazing.
Asian woman.
Oh, very good. I had to pick that up. So fantastic. So welcome, Monica. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Aloysius is someone I've met more recently, but is CEO of Singex in Singapore, a business that I've known and respected for a very long time. Aloysius has been there for 11 years, but also, like Monica, has had a long career in Singapore tourism and the convention area, and has been not only has been on the UFI board for many years, but as I noticed, has also sat on many other of the regional boards, promoting the region and looking into tourism and businesses and conventions and exhibitions. So it's fantastic to have Aloysius here as well. And as Aloysius reminded me when we reconnected, both he and I shared a minibus into the Vatican City about a year ago when our industry was blessed by the Pope. And as Aloysius said, we clearly didn't pray hard enough because 2 weeks afterwards, the industry was not having the best time of its life.
Gosh.
Which goes very nicely into where we are today. So the purpose of really this meeting is to just to see what the current situation is in Asia, understand perhaps some of the lessons learned as we start to emerge and as Asia starts to emerge, and then also really to understand from the experts we have here what we think the future holds from their perspective, both from an Asian perspective and as experts in the industry as to where we're going beyond this COVID pandemic. So without further ado, the first area we're going to pick up and is just really get an update of what the current situation is in each of the regions. So I think if we start in Singapore with Aloysius, maybe Aloysius, you can just give us how it's been during the lockdown and where we are at the moment in Singapore.
Right. Hi, Simon, and good morning and good evening from Singapore to everyone. Pleasure to join the team here. I think since COVID struck sometime on 7th of March last year, when WHO declared pandemic, I think we all went into a whirlwind of experiences. Singapore was no different. We went into what we termed as circuit breaker in April last year for a good 2 to 3 months, and we came out through a 3-phased opening since 2nd of June last year. We are now in phase 3. It's certainly a breath of fresh air locally because we can resume majority of the businesses. We can go to the pubs, the F&B areas, shopping centers. I know for our friends in the UK, you still have to wait probably until the 21st of April or something to that effect. But for us, it's still a very cautious approach and a very conservative approach taken still. All the measures, the safe management measures, as we call it, have to be in place. We have actually safe distance ambassadors roaming throughout the city to ensure that we abide by the laws, because it's very simple. If there is a cluster, right, it will spread like wildfire. And what we have seen over the past couple of months are new variants. Coming up, of course, from the UK, from South Africa, from Brazil, and I think there'll be more variants coming along our way. At the same time, we are looking also at the distribution of the vaccination. I think that has given us a true glimmer of hope. But I think the issue here is how fast will the vaccine administration be done? And it's also a grave concern for us because we can only be safe when all are safe, which means that it depends on how fast each country carries out their vaccination drive. Some reports have said that depending on how large the country is, you can go up to 4 to 5 years in terms of getting at least certain degree of herd immunity in the region, particularly in Indonesia, or maybe to a certain extent India, and maybe even for Malaysia and the like, it's about a year or two. So it really depends on the velocity of vaccine administration. Here in Singapore, we have begun a phased approach towards vaccine administration, starting, of course, with the seniors, the frontline staff, and we are now going into the age band of 60 and above. And I think by August or July, August, we hope to reach at least 70% of the population vaccinated. It is not mandatory. It is actually the government is trying to encourage everyone to take the vaccination. Currently, Pfizer and Moderna are the ones that have been administered, and as and when all other vaccines have been verified by the Health Sciences Authority here in Singapore to be administered, they will also be dispensed with as part of the vaccination drive. Why April or why August or September? As you may know, Singapore is going to host the World Economic Forum, special edition here in Singapore. And that's when we're going to see a lot of people coming in from different parts of the world. And as you can imagine, the virus is at different prevalence levels in different parts of the world, which means that the continued measures that have to be put in place, as well as control itineraries, control movements, will have to be considered. So even though one is vaccinated, now it has to look at how do you verify that everyone has been vaccinated. So which means that even though there is attempts to try to look at digital passports, looking at certifications, that remains to be seen whether it's going to be taken on a multilateral level, which will take a long time, or a bilateral level. So I think that's something which we will have to see how that works on. But it is something which we want to see how we can open up the travel and the borders as quickly as you can.
So the borders are still shut, are they, to the World Economic Forum, essentially?
That's right. So the borders are still shut. You have to have a green lane or special green lane being approved. So that is on a case by case basis. So for the events here in Singapore, it is taking a very slow process. Majority of it will be locally participants, though there are pilots that we have undertaken in order to test out the different travel protocols using such green lanes. Certainly, it's too slow, and that's where we are also working closely with the government to try to open up the borders as soon as we can, of course, in a safe and controlled manner. So that's where we are.
You have shows running then, do you, at the moment?
We do have, but on a very pilot basis. Majority of it is local participants, and the pilots are looking at bringing in whether it's 10, 20, 100 people in order for us to test out whether the various measures in place are well taken care of, and it gives a good degree of assurance to the health officials over here.
So would it be safe to assume that you're thinking normal events, subject to international travel, will start to happen in sort of August, September? Is that what I'm hearing?
We hope so. I think what's happening is that we need to see the degree of vaccination, because it doesn't depend just on Singapore alone. It also depends on the different markets. And for those, I think we're going to have two scenarios: the vaccinated populations and the non-vaccinated populations. And for our shows, as you can imagine, trade shows, we welcome both. How do we put in place measures that support non-vaccinated travelers? Are they going to be banned, or do they have to be subject to more rigorous testing? So those are things that have yet to be determined. So we will see how the situation pans out over the next couple of months.
Brilliant. Thank you. So Monica, how's the situation? You were also telling me that shops and pubs were open, which I was very happy for you. How is life in Hong Kong?
Well, Hong Kong, similar to Singapore, right? We have some ups and downs, and since the epidemic strike in last year, we started earlier than most of the country, right? We started in January last year, so we experienced already 14 months of disturbance. And I think learning from SARS, we are more disciplined. So wearing masks is not difficult. I mean, we're quite, we know about it, so, but we didn't expect that will last for so long, and the infectious rate is quite high. But the government have implemented some very effective measures. We never have a complete lockdown. The convention center here in Hong Kong, the HKCC, is open every day. Since the announcement of the epidemic and until now, we open every day. There is a short period of time in the last 3 months, the government actually have stopped the public event, including the public exhibition. They were starting in the middle of November, when we have the fourth wave of infections. There's a surge of confirmed cases. But when we say surge of cases, we mean about 100. In most of the country, you laugh about it, but we already put on the highest alert when we reached 100. That was the highest alert, and then the government actually stopped the public events. So, but we open, and as we are speaking, we just finished the wedding fair last week, and we're expecting a few more exhibition to come in the next few days. And we have the baby product exhibitions, and also the immigrations and investment exhibition coming. And in April, there will be 6 more exhibitions being held of different nature. So again, it's more of the domestic attendees. But the restaurants are open, although they have to shut at 10 o'clock. and also there is social distancing in terms of how many people can be seated around a table. At time when it's serious, there's only 2 persons per table. At the moment, it's 4 persons per table, and some time ago was 6 or 8. So it's really depending on the situation. The government will adjust it. Then they adjust it very quickly. People are rather disciplined. With face mask is wearing face mask is compulsory in some main establishment, like including the assembly venue like us, and government building and public place. You have to wear masks. Temperature testing and scanning, all that is now compulsory. But what is new now that the situation is more stabilized and events are resuming, is that the government have also added for venue operator like us and the catering operator, restaurants and catering facilities and clubhouse, all employees have to be tested every 14 days. So that is also a added assurance for people who are working in those hospitalities industry or more front-facing employees are tested regularly. So to sort of stop the spread. And also for exhibition as well. At the moment, the exhibitors need to be tested as well within 14 days.
Who pays for that, Monica? If the exhibitors have to be tested, who pays for the testing?
Sorry?
If the exhibitors have to be tested, who's responsible for paying for the tests?
Oh, there were a few industry that the government are paying for it. The catering industry, the construction industry, the health workers, venue operators, there are few industry at large. If you just walk in there and tell them you belong to that industry, you'll get a free test.
Okay, if I'm
Hmm?
not one of those and I want to be in an exhibition,
240 Hong Kong, 240 Hong Kong.
okay,
So it's 24 pounds,
which I have to pay myself as an exhibitor.
24 pounds.
Okay. Wow.
But it's very reasonable. You get a result within 2 days, and there's a minimum cost, to get tested.
The borders are still shut, are they, Monica? They're not.
Pardon me?
Are the borders shut to Hong Kong?
Well, the border, Chinese visitors from China, Macau, and Taiwan, they can still arrive, but they're subject to 14-day quarantines at home or hotels. Okay. So, but and also Hong Kong citizens can return, but they're subject to quarantine as well. But otherwise, yeah, the border is shut for other countries until some bubbles can be open, and that I think, I know that the government is working on it, and they would have the authority to open specific country or regions. We had to deal with Singapore, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
we were about to open, last year between Singapore and Hong Kong, to the first bubble to open.
That's right.
Yeah, there were some cases, and so we actually suspended. So we hope that we can reactivate that very soon. So when it opened, I think it will be gradual, and it will be a bilateral agreement depending the situation on that region and the country. Well, yeah,
we'll come back to that because that's going to be the next question: is how do we think we're going to emerge? So, Michael, just you can add and give us an update then on, as I said to you before, maybe on China and India and anything else you want to add on Hong Kong, and then maybe we can also move to talking about how it's going to progress. But what from your view is the situation elsewhere?
Thank you, Simon, and hi everyone. So as you can hear, we're not out of the woods yet. There's something I'd like to say, because there's obviously quite a lot of confusion out there and quite a lot of barriers which still need to be taken out of the way. And just to give a brief look at Hong Kong, if I want to go to China, I have to get a visa, and that visa entails a lot of letters from industry and also from government to allow me to go in. And then you've got to have a 2-week quarantine, and on return, again, a 2-week quarantine. If I go elsewhere and then come back to Hong Kong, I've got to have a 3-week quarantine on return. And so that's a significant amount of time. So there is some discussion now, as there are in other countries, and I understand Iceland yesterday allowed the opening to people who have been vaccinated with BioNTech, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson and others, but not Sputnik 5 and Chinese vaccines at the moment. So these are things that are looking to be happening in the region here in terms of, if you've been vaccinated, will we be able to have people going across the borders without quarantine? And this is being discussed at the moment with the Hong Kong government. And of course, that's got to link up with China, etc. At present, and as you've heard from both Monica and Aloysius, you know, there are the fairs that are being put on are local fairs, domestic fairs. So in China, there are many fairs which are going on. Quite a few people in the audience here who have put on fairs over the past few months, as ourselves and as others as well. But they are basically domestic square meterage. There is some international, but that tends to be people who have offices in those countries. In particular, we're talking about here China and Japan, or the trade offices of the consulates or the embassies look after the pavilions, and those people are looking after the inquiries for those either companies or the regions that they represent. But I can say that many of the fairs, and I see quite a lot of the videos in China, are thriving. They're doing very well. And it's a normal fair with lots of people, the stands, and making meetings between each other. I'd say that 60 to 70% have masks on in China. So there's getting to a stage where there's some acceptance to be able to walk around without masks. And you know, often I look at the media in Europe or the US, and that it doesn't seem to be that everybody's wearing masks in those countries. But in Hong Kong and Singapore, everybody wears masks, and very disciplined in doing it as well. But it's interesting that in China, there's become an acceptance, because basically you've got 1.4 billion people, and you have maybe 11 or 12 cases a day. Some cases, some days, no cases at all. Monica talked about a surge of 100 in Hong Kong, but that's over a period of 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
So in general, we have in Hong Kong between 10 to 15 cases a day. You know, we look at, say, Dubai, which has had some very successful international trade fairs with Gulf Food, with some 85 national pavilions, and IDEX with 35 national pavilions. They've got 3,000 cases a day in Dubai, but because 60% of the population has been vaccinated, and they feel that they can still put the shows on, they've been fairly successful in that. So people look at what's happening in Hong Kong, Singapore, for instance, with very few cases and very, very strict and disciplined positions. You know, is it going too far? So how do we start to advise to the governments that we need to have some sort of sensibilities in terms of being able to allow people in and to operate? And of course, the vaccination element is very important. And in Hong Kong, we've just started that about 4 weeks ago. And at the moment, we've got about 2.5 to 3% of the population vaccinated, which is not a lot, because there's a lot of questions and concerns which are coming through the media, predominantly out of Europe, about AstraZeneca, and is it causing blood clots? Is it doing this or that? So people have slowed down at a time when in the UK, you've got 26, 27 million people who've been vaccinated. So hopefully in the UK, you're going to be open there. Coming on to other areas in Asia. So Japan is the next market, which is, although it does have some surges there of COVID, and certainly Tokyo and 4 of the prefectures around it are currently still under lockdown. They're going to open on Monday, next Monday. They will open, but they are still having there, and in Kyoto and Nagoya and Osaka, small shows, which are reasonably popular, and but are domestic shows as well. One of the key food shows, Foodex, One Japan Management Association, took place just recently also. And then you come across to other parts of Asia, like Korea, and which is a very strict, disciplined government and an entity there, and they are having small regional fairs there. In Thailand, they have had some small fairs in Bangkok. In India, they've now just started to have some small fairs in Ahmedabad, in Gujarat, and also in Mumbai. And hopefully that's going to start to open up there as well. But recently, there's been some more surges, some 23,000 cases a day in India. So that may start to push that back. But you've got 1.3 billion people in India who are just aching to go to a show and aching to do business, because businesses are hurting. There's a lack of cash flow, and people are at home and they need to do business to generate cash again, because they don't have the social welfare payments that are in wealthier countries. So perhaps that gives a little sort of perspective of where we are at the moment.
Thank you. That was really good. And so I guess the summary is, because I know a lot of people in the UK, as you quite rightly said, we sit and look at the social media and media coming in from elsewhere and kind of assume everything is better than it is here. But actually the picture you're all painting is there's still some level of restrictions. Okay, Lucius, and you're able to go to the pub, which I am very jealous about. But on the other hand, from running exhibitions and running things, there's still restrictions there. And I guess what I'm hearing is from each of you that we're going to not really return to a level of normality till during the summer, towards the end of the year. And even then, travel restrictions may be in place. So go on, Michael, I was going to come back to you. So quickly then, just moving on to our second point, what do you think is the way we're going to emerge?
Sorry, Simon, I just want to add just quickly there, because I think it's quite right to segue in there. And from the Economist Intelligence Unit, they are saying that, the vaccinations covered at the moment will be for Singapore and Hong Kong by late 2021. So that should be finishing there. For Australia, Japan and Korea, but will be mid 2022. And for India, China and Thailand will be late 2022. And for Indonesia, Malaysia and Vietnam will be early 2023. So these are for full positions in regards to vaccinations. That's not meant to say in terms of when people will be allowed to come in, because hopefully we'll be able to get in earlier than that. But those are some dates that people perhaps are not aware of, that we may need to be looking at going into the future in terms of how we open up our markets for international travel and international shows. I'm sorry to interrupt there.
No, that's a good point. So that gives us a real context. Lucius, from your perspective, when do you think, as we look forward, do you think things can come back down? I know we've been asked a question as well about, do we think digital contact tracing and/or vaccination passports are likely to come in? So I think we are ending up focusing on international travel here. So how from your perspective, do you see that changing in Singapore and why?
Yeah, as Michael mentioned, different data points show that for Hong Kong and Singapore, we should achieve certain degree of herd immunity, up to 70-80%. Now, having said that, it's the international traffic that's of greatest concern, because now it remains to be seen how would the vaccinated population be recognized. So will there be digital passports? Now, what China has done recently is that if you have taken Sinopharm and Sinovac, and they will be issuing the travel visa for you to enter into China without quarantine. That's great. Now, that is a tinge of vaccine nationalism, if I can put it that way. Now, certainly for Hong Kong, Singapore, and many of the cities here in Asia, we can't afford that. It has to be depending on what vaccination and which source you take. How do you verify it? The WHO has mentioned that they're trying to have some form of mutual recognition, but that will take time for any multilateral effort. So it's going to be bilateral for now. But even that, this case, it remains to be seen whether each jurisdiction is going to have a similar set of recognition. The fallback plan, I reckon, has to be what is known as a serology test. So when you come in, take a blood test, and if that can be done, because it shows whether you have the antibodies or not. It doesn't matter whether you took it from Pfizer or Moderna or Sinopharm or Sputnik. As long as you can demonstrate and your bodies have antibody, that's the best way. So while the vaccine is indeed a game changer, I think it's going to be a whole lot of challenges to how countries are going to recognize it. And that's going to, I guess, dictate the rate of restrictions, border restrictions, travel restrictions being lifted. But I think it will be complemented because with the green lanes and some of the other consideration, the bubbles that will be emerging, it has to be seen as part of the arsenal to combat the virus. So I think that's what is going to happen. We hope to at least have, where Singapore is concerned, at least the return of some international participants, hopefully later this part of this year. But as I said, for us, because it's such a small economy, a very open economy, the ministry officials, the health officials here are taking a very conservative approach. So until we are able to establish a pretty conclusive verification of vaccination, that is going to will be a return to normalcy. Now, having said that, what do we do in the meantime? That's where the hybrid events come in. So for those that can't make it, we still have to make use of the digital platform for outreach, and where the markets are ready, either through green lanes or they have enough vaccinated populations, then you'll find that the physical face-to-face meetings will weave in very well. So I think it's going to be a truly omni-channel consideration moving forward.
Okay, well, we'll talk more about that as we go forward. That's good. What about, just one point, what about Singaporeans going out? I mean, that'll be the same question to all of you. We've talked a lot about us, you know, into Asia travel, and us and Europeans and Westerners coming into Asia. What about travel coming out? Because that's obviously quite important as well for exhibitions elsewhere. Is it the same situation, do you think?
I think
Yeah,
so. I think basically what Alonso said the same. You know, it's really dependent on the bilateral agreement and the situation in the specific country or region that you want to have that green lane or bubble to open. I think that will take place first before the whole world is opening. I think, you know, the vaccinations, the own control and all that, and I absolutely hope that the leaders of those nations will base on scientific proof.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel a bit, I had my vaccination, my first shot last week, and up until just talking to you guys, I wasn't that bothered about which one I had. I actually had the Oxford AstraZeneca one. But now listening to you, I'm now wondering whether that's going to be a problem for me if it wasn't on the list or whatever. So
I hope not. I hope not.
Genuine concern. Well, I don't particularly pick on Oxford AstraZeneca, but just generally, I hadn't thought of it as a problem, you know.
But that's what I meant. I hope the leaders and those diplomats who are working on those bilateral agreements were based on scientific proof and facts, not the political stand, you know, and that would be messy. I mean, because this recovery of economy from different country and region is urgently needed, not for one country, but for all, you know, for the globe to resume. So I said, I hope everybody is being rational about it and to work it out, but it will be gradual and it will be country by country.
I don't think it's something which is where there's an easy answer, but certainly, you know, if you've got the European community and the UK coming to some sort of agreements in terms of those things, and then you've got APEC for the region here, and or the new RCEP, etc. And ASEAN working on positions that hopefully will be able to work, but they need guidance from WHO, and WHO is trying to say at the moment, like you just did. So, you know, don't worry so much about the individual vaccines, just as long as you have them. But it is a concern because behind everybody at the moment in their thinking is what is not just the efficacy, and what is the danger of taking it at the moment to me, myself. So whether you might have higher glucose or cholesterol, or you've got underlying positions, you know, conditions, etc., let alone age. These are key things in people's thinking presently, and which is a shame because, you know, at the moment, you know, we're on the cusp of a recovery in the region, and you know, if you look at how fast we're going to be recovering, you know, we've got China, which is looking at China at 8% over the next year. India is looking at 12% growth recovery. Hong Kong, we've got about 3%, just to give you some ideas. And these are strong indicators of what we're looking at in terms of what should be going on within our countries and our region here. And we don't want to lose that momentum. Vietnam and Bangladesh, other countries which I know people are interested in terms of going forward. These are key indicators for us.
So it's interesting. So I think this, for me at least, this seems a bit different to how some of the conversations are in Europe and the US. Is that your focus is on vaccination, which I think is consistent everywhere, but it's pretty much on the international travel. So one of the other things that people asked us about the regulations was things like how to operate a show. We've talked about face masks, but also, you know, about spacing out of booths or adding aisles. All of those, you seem that I think I'm hearing that everybody's more comfortable with, and those haven't proved to be a problem. Lucius, is that fair, or am I missing a point?
Well, it's still early stage because they're based on the pilots, and given the evidence-based approach that the local government, Singapore government is going through, we require certain distance. For example, each exhibitor, you must have 8 square meters space. You need to have 3 meters separating the zones, and many other sort of configurations. It really doesn't make economic sense. So I think if you're a trade show organizer, come and say, I need like double the space at half the visitation, and no one's going to pay for that amount. So we really have to revisit the economics of it. Now, having said that, we had to go through the pilots to tick the box where safe protocols are concerned. Okay, we've passed that stage. Now, how do we balance safe protocols with the economics of a COVID safe event? Now, what's going to be in place, even with vaccination, is you're still going to have the mask on. You still need to have the social distance for the very simple reason. I think Michael alluded to that. It remains to be seen whether what's the efficacy of the vaccination, and also how long and whether you need booster shots after 6 months, and whether if you are vaccinated, are you still a transmitter? So remember, this vaccine is just to mitigate the impacts for each and every one of us, but it remains to be seen as whether are you going to be a transmitter of that virus. So it also has to be seen against the what is known as the viral load of each person. Now, those are question marks. So that's why we still have to put in place all these measures coming in now. So that's where we're trying to see for the shows here in Singapore, how do we rebalance to at least a reasonably profitable COVID safe event? That's going to be some journey.
Presumably profitable for both the venue and for the organisers in that respect, yes? So
both, that's right. We have to be in this together. So I think where the pilots have taken place, there is I would say a concerted effort to try to make that work. Of course, with government support. If you ask the organizer or the venue to foot the bill, no, we're going to go on with it. So, but having said that, now it's to find that sweet spot as to what should that look like. And also, if the various markets in the region for which international shows depend on, and you're going to get them trickling in, how are you still need to have some form of a digital engagement, at least to keep the show somewhat viable, both digitally as well as physically. We're all very familiar with how the economics work physically or face-to-face meetings, but it's still a so-called a consideration as to how digital events are going to play out. As you can imagine, it's not bringing in the monies that we hope for, but we have to find a different way to at least work through this intervening period until we open borders to at least near pre-COVID levels.
Brilliant. So, and Monica, what I've seen maybe wrongly on social media is a lot of the events that are in China and the pictures I've seen from Hong Kong, there doesn't seem to be a change in the spacing. Maybe it's just because the pictures are taken that way. So to my view, at least, it seems like the regulations in the region are better. You know.
No, but there are some rules. Sorry, Michael.
Sorry, did you ask
there
me?
Are rules.
I was asking Monica. I'll come back to you in a second.
No, the government have, as I said, a whole set of measures for running a safe event. Now that we open for public and trade show together, the capacity in the venue are kept to 50%, but 50% for the hall is plentiful. It's plentiful. whether it's for trade show or for public event. We held some successful trade shows in January, a dental congress and the exhibitions. It went very well. And as I said, exhibitors need to be tested. We also have a tracking system called Leave Home Safe. It is an app on your phone that when you enter to a show, then you activate the app. So you register, you're here, and then you sign off and you leave. So if you were in the same space and same time with another confirmed case, and you will get notified. So we track them down. I mean, the government is very strict on that. And all this sanitizing, cleaning, temperature checking, of course, that is all on. Actually, when you ask about, the fee for exhibitors to conduct the tests, most exhibitors don't have to pay for it because they belong one way or the other of different industry. But even though they have to pay the £24 or euro to conduct the test, it doesn't deter them. A lot of them actually welcome all this measure because that make them feel safer, and also the visitors feel more safe to come to events.
So
I feel more safe because everybody else is tested, so it's actually a good scheme. And for organizations like us, I have more than 400 staff being tested every 10 days. So I can.
And I'm sure, Monica, knowing you and the Hong Kong Convention Centre, I'm sure you're being as pragmatic as Singex in terms of how that works for the organisers. Because I noticed from Rajan in the chat here has just said that in India, venues are not giving discounts and the organisers are having to take double the space.
On that, it's even better. The government is paying for 100% rental.
Ah, okay.
For all exhibition, consumer.
That sounds very exciting. I'm sure many people's ears.
Until the end of this year. So,
So what we're doing in Singapore with a couple of venues here, it's because of the safety measures. You take whatever space you need, and anything that's additional because of the safe management measures or protocols, that's something that we will not charge. So that's part of the process of determining what exactly is the new model. Now, if once we've passed this stage and once the borders can be opened, we can then go back to some form of normalcy. But I think that's where we probably have to take that sort of equal pain, equal gain sort of approach. Not easy, but I think we are trying to work with a couple of the pilot events that have taken place here in Singapore. And I think that's something which is at least for other jurisdictions to start off with. Go on a net space. Go on net space. For all others, let's take it as part of the joint effort in order to determine whether or not that safe event can take place, and then so that might help.
Okay. Yes, Michael.
So
expand on the government element. That's interesting as well. Yeah.
So we're looking at here the need for flexibility. We're all dealing with uncertainty, not only just in Asia but the rest of the world. And we've got questions that you just asked. How do we actually sort of get this information together, and we get everybody to be agreeing on the same board? So we've got IATA that is hopefully working at the moment on what to do for the airline business. So you talked about digital passports. You've got three main ones out there: IBM, the Common Pass, Red Strike, that are possibilities. But you don't want three different types for one airline. So you want something that's common there and an agreement to actually start this off as quickly as possible. You want people to understand also our business somewhat better, as we've discussed quite a few times, and I know you have in the AEO, about governments recognizing what we do is different from putting on weddings and dog shows and all those sort of things. But with trade shows, some B2C, but mainly trade shows and what they bring in terms of wealth, and also in terms of increasing the visibility for SMEs around the world and encouraging business. So we've got the opportunities there. How do we, as an industry, make that work on a global basis, not just on local, regional ones? Because otherwise, we're just going to be talking about what can we do for one particular market or other. But it's not going to be done unless it's joined up.
No, that makes sense. And just to go back to your point, Monica, I know Eddie McCarron's just asked the question in the so you said the government are paying the venue hire in Hong Kong, yes?
Yes.
Yes. There's a subsidy scheme launched last year already, started last October, that the government is subsidies 100% of rental for exhibitions run by non-government exhibition, like other than, so private organizers, non-government organizer, if they run exhibition since last October until end of this year, December of 2021, the government will subsidize 100% of the rental. And of course, you have to comply with all the government's measure, as I mentioned earlier.
Wow. And that's any organizer, doesn't matter where they're from. They don't have to be Chinese or Hong Kong.
No. Informer, read, anybody.
All those nasty people, yes.
Anybody.
Wow.
That's right.
Okay. I think we'd all like our governments. I know the AEO, as you say, are having lots of discussions with the government about things that don't even contribute anything like that to our support. So
yeah. But there is long conversation and advocacy with the government in the early days, and then thank God, and they were very accommodating, and we have very good communication on that front to actually encourage more event to come back and new event to come.
See, now we're not only jealous of you that your bars are open, we're also jealous that you're getting government subsidies. So let's just move forward. We started to talk a little bit about this, and I guess I wanted to ask you all, as many of the questions did, is how do you think we're going to be post-COVID? What changes are going to continue? So just moving on, and we've had various subjects, so feel free to talk about. We've started to touch on the role of hybrid events and digital versus live events. We've also talked about whether this is going to change Asian travel patterns, and in fact, international travel patterns that will influence events. So I'd just like each of you just to maybe speculate as to what you think events in your region and or Asia generally, what you think is going to change as we emerge from this, what things will be permanent, what will be different. I'm sure many people are hoping that subsidies will be permanent, but I doubt that will be the case. But Lucius, do you want to maybe give us your view as to where you think it will be?
No, we do the Singapore FinTech Festival, and then we started off last year on a hybrid arrangement. And in our definition of hybrid, we were looking at the Nerve Center being a digital platform and with physical bolt-ons. So we actually had close to 30 over cities which are piped in, and they had local events. Now, this was in November, early December. You can imagine in mid-November, the EU or Europe actually went into a massive second wave, and some of the events we had to immediately shift to the digital platform. That was nightmarish actually. But having said that, we needed to have that platform, and we found that actually there has been some behavioral changes, and we maybe have to be prepared for that. Companies, until such a time where they can be rest assured that they will question is whether people need to travel. So there's a COVID insurance that you need to think about, whether you need to travel to do that deal, or whether you can do it online. And then only when the time comes, then you can do the travel. So I think you're going to see a number of some reduction in that. I think Bill Gates said that there's going to be a 50% drop in business travel that includes our own sector, our own industry. But I think that's where we should expect changes in corporate policies, travel policies, and the like. Having said that, there is definitely a need for face-to-face. I think everybody at the end of that hybrid digital session said that we need to come back. So that's one thing. Having said that, when they come back, the question is, can they come back? Will these vaccines and all these discussions that we spoke of, how will that play out? So there is I would say, an increasing realization that it would be cost effective to do a hybrid for the companies participating, but actually it is not the case for an organizer, because you will spend 2 to 3 times the cost, because you have to do the prep work. There are time zones that you have to deal with. There's recording, and you can't assume everybody knows how to pivot to the digital platform easily. And then you have to also augment it with the physical platforms. So your cost is going to go up at least 2 to 3 times. So that's where we found that hybrid is good. It's important to maintain that engagement. You have to be very laser focused as to which platform do you use for what purpose, so that it makes money sense. So I think that's something we need to look at.
Have you increased investment in your infrastructure in the venue to sort of facilitate this as well?
We did, yeah. So we've got our own studios, broadcast studios. We've invested also in digital platforms and we also look at developing algorithms to better understand our customers' wealth, so that we're able to support a range of what we call web engagement sessions. So based on the interactions, the conversations that are taking place, we actually know what are some of the themes that are emerging, and you can actually spin off a web engagement session, and that perhaps could give us the ability to do some charging or value-based pricing for that. But nothing beats, of course, as we all know, the trade show. We need that real estate. We need that player. So that I think that's something we have to come to terms with. What will be the new mix and the new model that harnesses both the digital and physical platforms?
Okay. So I'm hearing that, yeah, you think international travel is still the open question, and even when it's allowed, it's going to take a while to return back, and therefore with a hybrid, which is a word I don't like, but we haven't got a better word, but I know what you mean. Yeah, the mixture of digital and online. Digital and live is the key.
Now we have to take a very risk mitigation approach, because we can't assume that there will be no other pandemics. There might be a very rather vicious variant coming out, and we might all go back to lockdown, even though with vaccination. So the whole idea here is that in the hopefully unlikely event that happens, business must continue. And if you are able to I would say finesse the digital engagement, that will be a good arsenal. At least you can fall back on business continuing, hopefully with some interesting model that can emerge from this digital engagement. So I think we have to be prepared for that continuity, that eventuality.
Makes sense. Monica, I can see you.
I slightly disagree. I respectfully, I think technology will always be there, and it will continue to advance. This Zoom meeting we have, we never, used to be, and we're very good at it now after 9 months of having this Zoom. But I'm also getting a bit of Zoom fatigue. I'm very tired of seeing everybody flat, only 1D. I much prefer to deal with people. But I think UFI also have done a survey not too long ago, and also the result was very clear about how people are craving for face-to-face events. And yes, thank God for all this technology that we still stay in touch, but because there's no other alternative. That's why we're doing this, and when we're talking and we're staying in touch. But how many deals has been made through those e-commerce, and I think you look at all these survey from different organizations, that it's not near the same as when we have trade shows. And as far as the traveling sentiment is concerned, and we were talking to organizers, exhibitors, friends and families and all that, I think by Christmas, if the travel bubble open, half of Hong Kong will be gone, because people are so dying to travel. My husband could not wait, and he's getting his shot next week, and he said if the first flight open to Germany, he'll be gone back to Germany to visit families and deal with business and things like that. I think the essential will still be, of course, there'll still be some concern of traveling when the bubble open, but when bubble open to between the specific destinations or region, as I said, and that the situation is under control, when government would consider having this bilateral deal to open up the border, and that has to be under certain control and pretty good control, and that people will feel good to travel, and the essential travel, like doing business, I think that would reduce, but not to drastically, and there still will be essential travel. And that's that.
I sincerely hope your husband will be able to travel, because I'm trying to work out whether I can go to CISO, and my vaccination seems to make no difference whatsoever to my ability to do that. So, but I hope that doesn't work for your husband. Just on that point, Monica, because Stuart asked us the question as well, do you think the bubbles between Asian markets will open up quicker than they will across Europe? And how quickly do you think that will happen?
I think so. I think, as I said, Hong Kong and Singapore have been talking about that. Thailand, we have been talking to them, and I think among Asia city, it will open up first, and between us and China as well, it will open sooner than to the European country, because we know that we are more disciplined, and also I think again on the scientific facts, the cases is in many of the Asian countries and regions are being controlled, and we are much more stringent in our measure, and people more disciplined in following all the steps. As I said, in Hong Kong, 100% people wearing masks in public places, and you know, and we're in full compliance. So I'm very much hope to see Alonso's very soon.
Likewise.
I saw Michael giving you a little bit of a shake there. So Michael, what's your view?
Indian, yes, no.
Yes, I did think it was a bit of the Indian response. Yeah.
After spending the last 15 years going to India, my Indian friends have taught me well. I slightly disagree with what's being said, and I'm a little bit more optimistic. For sure, hybrid is an important part. Digital is an important part for the shows and what we've been doing over this past year or so. And COVID has spared our investment and work in this sector by tenfold than what it would have been. So hopefully it's going to actually bring us some things which are of excellence to our trade shows, which help us for the future. So working on things like artificial intelligence for matchmaking, etc., between buyers and sellers may well be sped up that much faster. And we're seeing huge increases in work with the internet in terms of how we work on our shows and bringing people together. But I think you've got to look at the evidence on flying in places like the United States and China, and also in India and the Middle East. And you know, you look at China today, domestic travel is back at the same levels as a year ago. So everybody's still traveling as normal in China. Our staff who are going from Shanghai to Guangzhou or to Beijing or to Dongguan are flying as normal as anyone else was going to the airports, and that's fine. And I think, you know, in the United States, you also see a lot of it's back, and I don't think it's up at 100%, but it's well up at sort of 50 or 60%. I mean, so they had a snowstorm the other day in New York, and for one day they had 1,500 cancellations in New York at JFK. So you know, that shows that there's a lot of people who are moving around there. We know that in Dubai and Qatar, they're shifting a lot of people going back and forth between Europe, Middle East, and the rest of Asia, let alone in Africa as well. So I think that people are getting used to those things. You know, you see in terms of opening up for tourism in Europe, you know, immediately they put the opening for Spain and Greece and Italy, etc. Within minutes, people have booked their flights to go there because they want to go there. Now, it's not just in terms of domestic or international travel and tourism. It's whether people want to go for business, and certainly people that we see from our exhibitors and our visitors, that they want to get back to traveling. There's a lot of companies and pavilions and governments who have the money ready. They're saying, we're going to put it down on the table now because we want to be at that particular show and we want that show to happen. And we've got people with their briefcases and their suitcases ready to go tomorrow. So I don't think there's a problem in terms of being able to get people here. But what I think will happen is that you'll see a gradual opening up. I don't think it's going to be in the bubbles, because I think the bubbles failed, unfortunately. I'd like to have seen that happen last year between Singapore and Hong Kong, but it didn't at the last minute. But we'll see some opening up of maybe regional with ASEAN and Hong Kong, with say also from mainland China, and there will be flights that will be monitored and looked at, but they'll become normal. And the same with Japan, and then it will open up also with India, Australia, and New Zealand, and then that will open up more and more with Middle East. So I think that the long distance flights, we call where you are at the moment in Europe and also from the US, will happen again, but it's going to come at the third stage of those three: local, medium, and long distance.
It sounds like it's next year, yes?
Yes, yeah. As I was saying earlier, in terms of those from the vaccination parts, it may well be following those sort of levels of for 22, mid 22 and late 22, but late 21 for the region here, in particular Hong Kong, Singapore.
Lucius, you had one more
Yeah,
thing?
picking up on Michael's point, indeed, the recovery is probably going to be very national. Large markets, large populations, like what China and the US, and also potentially India, right? You can start off going, and then you go with the regional bubbles, right? And this is where recently Australia and Singapore, we're talking about the bubble, and everyone is pretty excited to see at least this bubble open up by July, August, thereabouts. And what we have tested out and trialed actually is to have a global sort of arrangement whereby now you can actually travel to Singapore in a bubble arrangement called Connected Singapore. So whether you're from country A or country B, once you pass your test, you can come over here without the need for quarantine. So you come in here, do business. It's in a bubble setup, control itinerary, and then you can go ahead and do. And right, going to Michael's point, I mean, there is strong business pickup because there is pent up demand, and we've seen that, and we've got people from the US, UAE, from different parts coming in, making use of this bubble. So it actually works. So I think that it's, as I said, part of the arsenal. So in doing our shows and doing events, we also have to be pretty much mindful as to how do we flex this opening up of these markets, and therefore knowing full well we're dealing with vaccination, with green lanes, with bubble arrangements. I think these are going to be part of our lexicon. And then how do we then activate them? I think that's something which, if anything, that's what a hybrid physical will look like. We are going to be very well versed with the different channels that are going to come in, because that's what will make the business community thrive, and of course leading to face-to-face meetings.
Okay, we're coming to the end, so I'm going to do one more thing. Although just to note that you've persuaded one of the most exciting up-and-coming organisers in the UK to move to Hong Kong, based on what you said. So Emma Barrett's very excited by that. Just while we wind up then, and I'll give each of us some time to think about this. I'll start with you, Michael. Just in one, maybe two sentences at most, what do you think the most important lesson that you have learned about live events from the pandemic that we need to continue? What's the most important thing that you think you've picked up during this last year and a half?
Well, I think it was something we also learned from when we had SARS. SARS was, as you remember, Hong Kong, China, Singapore, and Canada, and a little bit in Thailand. But the fatality rates was about 5 times the rate than COVID-19. And what we came out with was, in terms of the links with our customer base, our buyer, visitor base, and our exhibitors, to continue keeping those links was most important. And today we've got kit that can actually do that, the software, in much better ways than we did in those days back in 2003. So I think it's important that we still relate to and work with, and by utilizing our digital positions, that we have those links to do. But I think it's still important that we make sure that we are working as hard as possible to try and get our face-to-face events back again. You know, we've had positions where we've got our events that have been cancelled or postponed for one event, then perhaps 2 events. So what's the position about whether you're going to still have the 3rd time event taking place? So I think there are some dangers there, and why it's important to get governments and associations to be working harder in our industry to make sure that we get what we need, and not have people suffering from the anxiety that they do in our populations at the moment.
So Monica, finishing on Michael saying about government supporting, what's the key lesson you think you've learned?
Well, I think in crisis like that, communication is the key. And then because there's the changes and there's so many things we didn't foresee. You know, at first we thought it's SARS, but it wasn't SARS. It was SARS 10 times, 100 times more severe. So you, in crisis like that, I think communication is the key, whether with your team, your customer, government, advocacy. As I said, we really been engaging them from the very beginning, to get what we get, and we actually take up more responsibility to vetting the applications and to help them to make the procedures very simple, so that the application can be approved very quickly. The reimbursement can be done very quick, right, Michael? You get your money back within 2 weeks, I think. All that. So. Communication, but also in crisis like that, we shouldn't be thinking just about yourself. I mean, we shouldn't be thinking about our interests, but we have to think about the bigger interests of the industry, the organizers, because there's a long term. The suffering is just not today. It's not about canceling one event. It's about the landscaping of the landslide of the cancellation and postponement. How do we schedule it in a way that we're not hurting anybody in a way? I mean, this is the time to be united. This is the time to communicate with the community. You know, your organizers, your stakeholders, your associations. You know, make use of the association, whether it's AEO, UFI, ICAS. You know, to have this bigger force to advocates and to work for the industry together. Only with that we have the power to negotiate with the government. Only with that power, you know, that we can move ahead stronger and get through this storm, you know.
Perfect place. Lucius, I always think it's hard. I always feel bad picking on the last person to do this after everyone else said. And I also, because you shared so much with us, including praying harder. But what's your final thought?
Pray harder. Divine intervention, if it helps. No, I share with Monica. I share Monica's point and also Michael's point. And clearly, what has emerged here is the need to be agile. And I think what this has spotlighted is that we are so creatures of habit. And I know we all want face-to-face meetings. We want to go back, but I think the necessity is the mother of invention. We really have to really think about new solutions. And this COVID is clearly an unprecedented crisis, and it means that the degree of collaboration has been immense, actually. And it's not just about within the country, but across regions and even associations. I think we have to band together, because this crisis, this COVID, does not respect whatever borders or associations, large companies, small companies. We're all in this together. It is the first time I've ever seen a global reset of sorts. And it doesn't matter whether you're the big boys or whether you're a startup. You're all facing this together. So we have to work together. And because a rising tide lifts all boats. And that's something which I thought is what we've learned. It is not easy, because even the governments are trying to crack their heads. That's why it's called a novel coronavirus. It's a new virus. And if anybody knows, this is just like SARS, I think they are hallucinating. It's so different, because even the variant here is changing. So we cannot be certain that if we go back to normal with vaccination and life goes back to normal, I think we will be kidding ourselves. We have to be prepared for any eventuality, and that is what will make our industry stronger. How do we risk mitigate? How do we make sure we have business continuity in this situation? So using all the technology and everybody certainly is yearning to go back to face, but I think we have to take a very pragmatic approach and make sure that we take a risk mitigated approach henceforth.
Well, that's a brilliant message from all of you. Thank you all of that. That's very warming. So look, I'm gonna finish up by closing now. I hope everybody in the audience found that as interesting as I did. I think it was fascinating. Thank you, everybody, both for your clear views and also for some controversy and even some disagreement, which was good, because that's what we wanted, was different perspectives. Thank you for doing this at the end of your day as well, and accepting the invitation. I think that final point that you all were making about we're all in this together seems very important. Given that this is the AEO, one of the associations of the industry where we're all thinking together. And I know that feeling is great amongst everybody here as well. So it's good to hear it from there. Again, you've also apparently convinced Rajan to move to Hong Kong, which I find amazing to believe. So I'm sure you've convinced all of us that we're all very much looking forward to coming and doing business with you and running shows in your area, as well as welcoming and seeing you here as well. So thank you very, very much. Have a good rest of the evening, guys, and thank you to everybody who joined us.
Thank you. Hope to see you guys soon.
Thank you.
Hope to physically see you all soon.
Yes.
Oh, likewise, likewise.
Yeah.
See
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right, and you're welcome. We got cricket teams here as well.
Oh.
Cheers, guys.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.